Sometimes we rename streets for people who are very important to New York City, but they don't really have a connection to whatever block or street that we're renaming. We don't have that problem today. We do not. I don't know what fates conspired to bring Marie and I think 4-year-old Louise in 1961. You were 1954. You just aged yourself publicly there. Okay.
Fair disclosure. Full disclosure.
What conspired to bring this mother and young daughter to what was then called 130 Morningside Drive, apartment 6C. But I'll say this, their arrival here changed the history of this neighborhood forever. Yes, it did. And it's hard standing here today to remember, I mean, I can't remember because I wasn't alive, but to understand how different this block, this neighborhood, this city was in the 50s and the 60s. What a political battleground this exact block was, and so many of the blocks around it. As activists like Marie were engaged in intense battles with Columbia. And that was one of many battles that Marie Runyon engaged in over, I think what would be fair to call a 6-decade career of activism. A 6-decade career of activism, when she fought on behalf of tenants' rights, and fought on behalf of prisoners' rights, the rights of radical activists, fought against overdevelopment, fought against unjust wars and the military-industrial complex. She accumulated quite an impressive list of adversaries over those 6 decades. I think it's fair to say that she outworked, outmaneuvered, outran, and in the end, outlasted pretty much every single one of those adversaries. And in the process really became an icon for several generations of activists and leaders and aspiring elected officials. Myself and my generation definitely included, and probably almost all of you here, for the idea of the not just the ability but the necessity of taking on big institutions and big fights. And I'm probably going to mangle her exact wording, but I think as she put it, if the forces of power make life intolerable, taking them on isn't just an option, it's a necessity. And boy, did she live that out again and again and again. And we felt that impact here on this block, and up in Albany, and down in Washington, and far beyond. And this community and this city and this country are better off for it. And I am thrilled that for time immemorial, we'll commemorate this incredible leader, this incredible force, this incredible spirit, right here on the brand new Marie Runyon Way. So thank you for being part of this. And I'm now going to pass off the man who has carried the mantle as the successor of the successor of former Assemblymember Runyon, the great Danny O'Donnell. Let's give him a big round of applause.
Thank you very much. I've done many of these kind of events in my 16 years as an elected. None is more meaningful and none is more deserving than this. Marie and I were friends for 25 years. We met when I served on Community Board 9. And one of the buildings that she was working to save, the city was taking away. Little did they know I'm a criminal defense attorney, and I cross-examined the city in the public hearing, and after the hearing she walked up to me and said, "I need to know who you are." I said, "I'm Danny O'Donnell." We became fast friends. This block would not look like this but for Marie Runyon. This neighborhood would not look like it looks but for Marie Runyon. And occasionally I take some pretty hard positions in the New York State Assembly, and my colleagues say to me, "Do your voters really want to hear this sort of stuff?" And I would respond to the old-time staffers by saying, "I represent Marie Runyon." And they understood exactly what that meant. So I'm very proud to be here, and I'm very proud that you invited me, and let's unveil, or what do we do, or unslip, or whatever it's called, something like that.
All right, thank you so much. It's not every day that a legal lion shows up on this corner, but we have someone who I think himself was inspired to great leadership and activism on behalf of justice in the city, who's here with us today, and that is the incredible Norman Siegel.
To the grannies that are here, the grannies are here, just raise your hands so everybody sees. Let me be a little theatrical. Now that I have a hat, I take my hat and tip it off for Marie Runyon. Others, likewise. Marie Runyon was sui generis, one of a kind. She was a leader among leaders. She distinguished herself by displaying for many years passion, intelligence, strength, and warmth. Marie was always the people's activist. Her leadership role was front and center, or actually I should say front and left. When the grannies on October 7th, 2005 got arrested for planning to enlist in the Times Square Military Recruitment Center on 43rd and Broadway so that young people would not have to fight the war in Iraq. They chanted, "We insist, we want to enlist. We insist, we want to enlist." Marie was one of the leaders of that action, and some of the other people who are here today. Marie, with her cane, was one of the 3 grannies who went up to the door. They discovered the door was locked. You have to understand, the military was afraid of 18 grannies, so they locked the door. Big mistake. So Marie went up with her cane and banged on the door, and she said, "Let us in, let us in." Now the grannies then read a statement. They sat down and were arrested. Now, the good thing is, if the door was over here, they kind of moved 4 inches and then sat, which gave us the legal theory that no one was blocked by going into the military recruitment. And actually, some people had video at that point. When you look at the video, there was actually a person who came in when they sat down, walked behind them, they opened the door and let them in. So even a lawyer like I could win that case. At the trial, Marie testified, and all the grannies testified, and it was an incredibly diverse group. And she said we were sitting down to make our voices heard. And after a 5-day trial, the judge, Neil Ross, dismissed the charges of disorderly conduct. I was one of the lawyers with Earl Ward who represented the grannies, including Marie. Marie inspired others to speak out against injustice and civil and human rights violations. Her spirit, as you've heard, so I won't go into detail, galvanized others to fight Columbia regarding housing and to fight Columbia for years for the rights of the tenants and herself. And I'm sure Michael will talk about that. Columbia raised that building in her honor, and it's now, as you all know, Marie Runyon Court. And today, with Mark and Danny and everybody else's support, this area will become Marie Runyon Way. What a... Let me conclude by saying we loved and greatly respected Marie for who she was and the role model. Mark called her iconic figure. I agree with that. She was a person of conscience. We all benefited from working with and being friends with Marie. And today, we all gather to pay tribute to Marie's legacy of activism. Marie would be disappointed if I didn't then say that we all need, especially during the Trump era, especially with what's going on, not only in this country, but in the city as well, that we need to recommit ourselves to carrying on Marie's legacy of activism. Marie would want us to do exactly that. Thank you.
We're getting this whole thing started, this whole renaming started. Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay, good. So I have a few things to say. Originally we were going to have a bullhorn instead of this. It's probably good that we have this because you can hear me and all of us better. But I thought there was poetic justice in having a bullhorn. One Christmas, we asked my mother what she wanted for Christmas, and she said, "I want a bullhorn." And she would lean out her 6th floor window and tell people not to break into cars and not to block traffic and whatever else she thought was inappropriate and unjust, she would put out loud and clear out the window. When you were breaking into that car, that was her. She would come out here and direct traffic right at this corner. The police, when she was, like in her late 80s, blind, the police would get very upset about it. And she said, "Well, you come out here and direct traffic and I won't have to." So this was a big corner for her. I'm hoping that people will see this street sign and say, "Marie Runyon Way, who's Marie Runyon?" And they'll Google her. Somebody put her on Wikipedia. I don't know who it was, but it's a pretty decent entry. And there are other entries. So I hope that people, including especially the younger generation, will be curious and use their ever-present smartphones to find out what it's all about and be inspired and take her as an example. I just want to mention that in my mother's memory, I asked for donations to the ACLU. My mother was membership director at the ACLU from 1954 to 1961 approximately. And we did raise, I finally found out last week, we raised $2,835 from 47 donors. And if you weren't one of them, or if you want to help bring it over the 3,000 mark, I have some little envelopes right here. My mother's daughter, she was first and foremost a fundraiser, and I kept telling the ACLU, she would want to know how much was raised. And they finally got it together to let me know. So see me if you'd like an envelope. We are having a huge spread at the apartment after this, so I hope all of you will come up to 6C at 130 Marie Runyon Way and commune and eat and so on and so forth. I'm going to hand the mic over to Ron Nerio, who's lived with my mother for the last 15 years.
15 years.
He has a few things to say.
Don't give up the ship was one of her constant slogans. No matter what was going on, no matter how much you felt that any fight you were involved in was almost impossible, don't give up the ship. And her example was day after day, every day, she'd get up often before I would. She'd be in her office, whether she was working on the Free Mumia Abu Jamal campaign, opening up donation envelopes for hours sometimes before I had even had my breakfast. And I knew her when she was, I knew, of course, about the very famous Naval Recruitment Center episode. And it was just an amazing thing to live with somebody who had this kind of dedication, this sort of fight, this sort of moral commitment. And it was one of the most fortuitous things in my life to meet Marie Runyon.
Who knew Marie and loved her. Her passion for justice, I think, was matched by her stamina in the face of what she knows is an ongoing struggle, and her love, genuine love, and ability to connect with people. There's so many people here that I have come to know from her circle, and they're all beautiful people. Marie had a magic, and she has inspired the grannies for a long time. You know, when you'd call Marie, she'd answer the phone, and she'd say, "Good morning, Glory." And I'd like to think that we will have to say, "Good morning, side Glory," anytime we think of her. Marie, here's to you.
Some of you are old enough to remember what this building used to look like back in the late 60s, early 70s. This building was not there. In fact, originally this was a row of brownstones which were demolished, and for many, many years this was a rubble-strewn vacant lot. So you could stand here and look up at Marie's window and see all of the flower boxes with petunias. And I remember every spring how happy she was when she could actually dig her fingers on the dirt and plant petunias in her window boxes. And some of you participated in the various squats that we organized in this building. I remember 4 in particular, where we would move people in late at night, and the next morning they would get arrested, and Columbia would send in workers, and they would, smash all the facilities. They'd smash the sinks, the toilet, everything, and then they'd seal the door. And it's very fitting that this building is now named after Marie, and that this street is now named after Marie. And she actually wanted this, which I was sort of surprised about, that she actually wanted the recognition. But you know what? So what? That's great. She was the most, I don't want this to sound flip, she was the most Christian person I have ever known. I think she genuinely cared about her fellow human beings. Anyone in trouble had her help. Didn't matter who you were, even if she didn't agree with you. If you were in trouble, she would go out of her way to help you. And I saw this again and again and again. And she should be an example to all of us. She never stopped. I remember seeing a photograph of her in Newsday at a Granny's picket line with her walker. And
blind came.
And blind. She never ever stopped until she just couldn't do it anymore. This is really something to think about, and for us to remember her with gratitude and love. And I don't know what else to say. It's just, it's really hard to believe she's gone. I knew someday this would happen. She lived a long, long life, and until the last couple of years, she was all there mentally, and it was wonderful to see her, even if she was deaf and even if she was blind. And she would say, "Now, who are you?" Yes, and then you'd have to remind her. One time she didn't remember her cousin, so it was like, hey, let's hope I don't get that way, but we'll see. Anyway, God bless you all, and thank you for coming out today for honoring Marie. God knows she deserves it.
Yes.
Who actually makes the sign? Who makes the sign? DOT or?
Yeah.
The family, please do the honors here. Now, I'm going to tell you the truth. Brian, you're
Typical. Who said it would ever be easy with Marie?
Who's acrobatic?
It's the city for you.
I got it.
Thank you.
You did it. That's pretty good, huh?